Hey, and welcome back to the Psychedelic Podcast by Third Wave, connecting you to the leaders and pioneers of the psychedelic renaissance. This is your host, Paul F. Austin, and today I'm speaking with Austin Mao, the co-founder of Ceremonia.
I think this is for people who are really discerning about their own transformation. They're looking for great safety, looking for great facilitators. They're looking for access in a legal setting here that is in the middle of the United States. They're looking for a container that has held hundreds of people with 100% five-star reviews and 96% saying it's the most transformative experience of their lives. They're looking for that.
Hey listeners, this is Paul F. Austin, founder and CEO at Third Wave, and welcome back to the show. Today we have an enlightening journey ahead as we delve into the world of plant medicine and spiritual healing. But before we dive in, a quick reminder to follow the Psychedelic Podcast on your favorite platform and join our community at community.thethirdwave.co to engage with like-minded individuals and share your thoughts on today's episode. All right, let's get into it. Today, I'm joined by Austin Mao, co-founder of Ceremonia, a nonprofit entheogenic church in Denver, Colorado. Austin is a writer, speaker, serial entrepreneur, and certified psychedelic integration coach. He has guided over 400 founders through accelerated transformations with plant medicine. Previously, Austin was the CEO of a tech and real estate business while working only 4 hours a week. In 2020, Austin's path took a profound turn towards deep self-discovery and healing through plant medicine, marking the beginning of a new chapter dedicated to facilitating change in others. Along with his wife, Choo, Austin co-founded Ceremonia. Austin and I met in Miami maybe 3.5, 4 years ago, and we've known each other both personally and professionally for the last few years. And I think what he's doing in Denver, Colorado is pretty cutting edge in a legal but also decriminalized context, and really helping to support a lot of people with deep healing through psychedelics. So Austin sat down with me to share his profound journey with plant medicines and the unique experiences offered at Ceremonia, including high-dose psilocybin ceremonies. He walks us through the intricacies of preparation and integration work at Ceremonia, offering a glimpse into the transformative potential of psychedelic ceremonies. Austin also guided me through a brief version of the group circling practice that is offered at Ceremonia, and Austin helps to shed light on Ceremonia's status as one of the few legal retreat centers in the USA that offer psychedelics. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Austin Mao. Hey listeners, welcome back to the Psychedelic Podcast. I'm sitting across from Austin Mao, the co-founder of Ceremonia, a retreat center based out of Denver, Colorado, that offers legal medicine experiences for small groups of people. And we're actually at Austin's home right now. He lives here with Choo, his wife, and it's massive. It's up to 10,000 square feet. There's a number of bedrooms. We were in the steam room last night, cold plunges. There's a full-size pool, which I think is undergoing construction at the moment. And this really cozy fireplace spot that I've been enjoying all day. So I just want to first thank you for having me over, Austin, and welcome you to the show as well.
Oh, well, this is your home too. Like you, Paul.
Thank you. So we've known each other for some time. Our relationship started in a very interesting way that involved ketamine, probably a little too much ketamine, if I remember. And then we've gotten to know each other quite a bit since then. I came to visit your center last year just for the day during the MAPS conference. We've talked over Zoom multiple occasions, attended an event called Yearning Man together, and have run into each other at various other places and locations over the last few years. So you're a man that's up to a lot, and there's no shortage of shenanigans in all the best ways. And surprisingly, I just, even today, found out new things about you. So I'm sort of looking forward to what new things I'll find out about you in this podcast interview. This will be delicious and provoking. So where I want to start is, let's start with ayahuasca.
Always a great place to start.
All right. So you have a really fun story, which I want you to tell on the podcast. But more or less, you made it into Costa Rica just before lockdown. You enjoyed the sort of playboy, digital nomad, living in beautiful places. I mean, you were with Choo at the time, of course, but you were just living it up, from what I hear. And then soon after that, we met each other in Miami, and you were interested in ayahuasca. Was that your first initial interest in ayahuasca, or had you worked with plant medicine prior to our meeting 3.5 years ago?
So I think you recounted on the podcast we just recorded together
Yeah.
for our podcast that we met in October 2020, which is a great memory.
Something like that.
Something like that.
I can check my emails for when we were first coordinating.
The first time I sat in ayahuasca was in February 2020.
Oh, interesting.
And I remember that very vividly as it relates to pandemic and COVID and lockdown, because the stock market crashed right like the second day, like after the first ceremony. You remember? And that's when everyone was like, oh shit, it is real, right?
Right.
The story actually goes back a little bit from there, because in December 2019, Choo and I were in China when COVID came out in China, and it was everywhere. Like everyone was talking about it, et cetera, right? And when we were in China, a friend of ours who has government contacts said, I'll never forget the call, it was around midnight. And he's like, get out right away. They're about to close. They're about to quarantine Shanghai's airport. You know, China was like selectively quarantining certain places, but it hadn't hit like the big metropolitan area yet, right? So we booked the next flight out. 2 days later, Shanghai airport closed off. So we go back to the US, and, how I got into ayahuasca is a friend of ours, Keith Farazi, said, hey, you should go to this retreat called One Heart. You'll do great, is what he said. By that time, I already had over 100 psychedelic experiences recreationally, many years of Burning Man, blah, blah, blah. So I went in with a chip on my shoulder thinking, this is a networking opportunity for me. And as you know, ayahuasca is, well, if you go in thinking that way, it kind of kicks your ass.
Yeah?
Yeah. And there was this document that we had and a dieta and so on and so forth. But I was so cavalier. I had margaritas the night before. That was in Playa del Carmen in Mexico. And that was just, I can go into it later, but incredibly opening experience. And so a month after that experience, we were snowboarding in Utah, and then the mountain closed down, and then all of Vail resorts across the United States closed their mountains down because of COVID. And then that's when Choo and I realized, okay, it's happening here. So I think it was 2 days later, we got a flight that landed at 10:30 p.m. in Costa Rica. They closed the borders at 11:59 p.m. And we spent the next 6 months in Costa Rica, like one of a handful of tourists in the entire country.
Wow.
And when we were there, my wife did ayahuasca for the first time at a center there, which actually wasn't a positive, like it wasn't a well-held container. It's pretty much a model of what not to do. And then we started doing ayahuasca in an intentional way and LSD in an intentional way, almost weekly for a period of time.
Weekly?
Yeah, like alternating between the two.
Acid and ayahuasca?
Medicines, yeah.
I think there should be someone who builds a clothing line called Acid and Ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca, A&A.
Yeah, A&A.
Yeah. I mean, with your last name and mine.
Exactly, we could do that.
We could do that.
I didn't know you loved acid and ayahuasca as much as I did. So you're alternating medicine work.
Yeah.
Every week. How long does that last, and what do you notice as shifts and changes in that time period that are maybe different than what you had experienced prior doing mushrooms recreationally or acid recreationally?
I think there are a couple layers to that answer. First of all, I would never recommend to people to do what I did, and knowing what I know now, I would not do that again, right? Like when I sit with plant medicine now as a participant, when I'm not in service with the medicine, I only do that once every 6 months usually. And so my first ayahuasca experience, the magnitude of what I experienced, it doesn't even compare to my recreational experience. And that 100 recreational experiences, yes, I had very profound experiences. I had deep connections. I was able to tap levels of oneness or spirituality, and that was really profound. But in the ayahuasca experience, I unlocked a level of healing, a level of spirituality, a level of intimacy and authenticity with myself that I had never experienced before, not even close. I went in agnostic, bordering atheist. I came out like with a poem called "Thank You." That was a devotional poem of gratitude to God. And now I'm a minister of a church. So this path. It was a door opening, and now as I continue to work with these medicines, it is a deeper and deeper exploration of myself. Now, in the alternating LSD and the ANA in Costa Rica that I did, in a lot of ways, I didn't know what I was doing. And there's both pros and cons to that, right? The pro to that is that I was in the full sailor on the wide ocean of my mind, of my consciousness. And so I was able to go into really deep levels of exploration, of visioning, of beingness. But what I was lacking was the skills and the tools and the teachings, the wisdom from wisdom keepers, from meditation of thousands of years, all the way down to psychotherapy of the last century. I was lacking that, and so I didn't have a integration of what I was experiencing, and I didn't know what I was missing. And when I would suffer, suffering came in the form of my relationships, my business, my purpose in life, the times when I was distracting myself with various mechanisms that I just couldn't even identify, didn't have awareness for. I didn't even know I was suffering to that extent. And in that regard, there's a parallel to when I first did ayahuasca. When I first did ayahuasca, I lived what I called an Instagram life. I was humble bragging, selfies in all the places around the world, working very little, having cars, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't know that I was suffering. I thought I was living a great life, but inside, it's what Ram Dass calls, who are you in the privacy of your own heart? I like to think of it like, who are you when you're sitting on the toilet in the morning? I was lonely. I was purposeless. What I posted on social media didn't reflect at all the melancholy of my life, the aimlessness of my life. And also I was so boastful. I didn't even recognize the ego from which I came, which disconnected me from everyone except for other people who were either boastful or searching, And so I lacked meaning and connection. And I didn't even know that was available to me. So this path of ayahuasca, medicine, ANA, whatever you want to call it, has led me to the place where I'm continuing down of just like deepening in myself, which enables me to connect with other people, connect with spirituality in an intimacy that I never even experienced, even touched before.
It's beautiful and well said. Thank you for touching into that for all of us. So this sense of purpose and meaning, fulfillment, there was a period of melancholy. There was a period even of it sounds a little bit like a period of just lack of awareness. And ayahuasca opened up a portal that helped you to perceive things in unique ways, unique perspectives. And from that came this, in many regards, where we are now, Ceremonia, just outside Denver. So far, I believe you've had a couple hundred people who have gone through medicine experiences here, including some very prominent people in the psychedelic space. The programs are all contained within this environment. You weave in, as you've told me, a lot of techniques and approaches that you see drive incredible results in a short period of time. And I don't think there's anyone else who's doing it quite like this legally in the United States, or really even elsewhere. So your approach is very unique. Your methodology is very unique. And I don't want to talk about that necessarily. I mean, we can get into it later on. But what I'm more curious about is what are some of the major influences or teachers or kind of knowledge and training base that has informed the protocols, the methodology, what you're bringing into the medicine space here in Ceremonia? What is that rooted in?
I think that, what came up for me as you shared that question is the greatest teacher for me has been suffering. Because I was with a friend yesterday that said, we're seekers, right? And when I suffer, I seek to discover why I'm suffering so that I can work on myself to reduce my amount of suffering. Buddha says that life is suffering, right? And that suffering serves a purpose. It leads us to a place where we're like, I've had enough. I want to heal from this, or I want to let go of whatever I'm attached to that's creating that level of suffering. The first time that, the impetus for Ceremonia is when I went to a retreat that I lovingly call Ayahuasca boot camp. It was like a 7-day retreat, complete silence. And in the first workshop, we had to meander around the space. There were 12 people or 13 people, and we had to lock eyes with somebody that we trust, and I was the odd man out. Then I had to go and look each person in the eyes, all 12 people, and hear from them why they don't trust me. That was the first workshop of the first day of 7 days. And then we did ayahuasca and hape and all these different medicines. In that experience, I realized just how much pride I was holding on to that disconnected me from everybody else, right? Myself disconnecting from everybody else. From there, what I did is I sought to learn how to be more humble, but also how to excavate from underneath me with the tools of awareness, like what is inhibiting me from being me in my messiness, in my shadow, etc. Right? And what's come of that through an iterative process, we're about to run our 26th retreat tomorrow, 26 retreats in 2 years, right? And before this, I was a tech entrepreneur that always did a bunch of iterations. What's come of this is this iterative process where we've kind of honed in on the things that we believe works. And earlier you were sharing with me your 5 pillars for Third Wave. We have 3 pillars here, and it's mindfulness, self-empowerment, and connection, right? And so mindfulness is we can only change what we're aware of. And so let's use tools from meditation, from mindfulness, from Zen to enhance our awareness, right? And then let's pour loving kindness or compassion, or in Buddhism, metta, into those parts of us that are now brought forth to the light, right? 2, self-empowerment. This is the skills that we can learn to identify and then be with our experience of ourselves. Because the first thing that happens when we experience something that's challenging is fight, flight, or freeze, right? Same thing happens in psychedelics. If there's something that came out from underneath, like my original trauma that I discovered in ayahuasca, and I'm not ready to meet that because I don't have the skills to do so, then that's when we can have a bad trip or
even the nervous system capacity, right? The sort of stress resilience or the capacity to regulate through breath, right?
Totally.
Can totally spin us out.
Yeah, you're speaking to what I call capacity.
Yeah.
It's like the capacity to hold experience, right? Yeah. Which goes hand in hand with skills. The more skills we have, the more we can practice and build capacity. And so the self-empowerment comes from psychotherapy, psychospirituality, various tools that I can apply to myself when I realize with my enhanced awareness, where am I right now? And the third, connection. So much of the practice that we do here in container building is building a level of authentic relating with each other, right? To really be with each other and see each other and hold each other in a supportive environment. There's this author that I really love, David Brooks, wrote a book called The Second Mountain. He says the core, maybe you could say problem in society as he sees it now, comes from the individualism of the West. 100 years ago, you and your neighbor would have dinner together and would support each other, right? Now we barely even glance at our neighbors. And so as we approach the work with psychedelics, I think it's so fundamentally important how connected we feel with other people, not only for our own sense of safety in the set and setting of like, here's a container of people that are strangers that I'm about to trip with, but also for the tools that we bring home when we go back home, because we live in interconnected worlds, right? We're constantly impacting each other. And we live in a world where that's fraught with uncertainty, right? I could walk outside and get hit by a bus tomorrow. I don't know. I could get a phone call from a dear friend or a loved one, and suddenly I don't know what might happen there. And so this experience, I believe, is a microcosm of what the world actually is. The psychedelic experience is a microcosm, and it prepares us for bringing those same skills and capacity back home when we go home. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and that helps to have those skills when we go back home, because then we can share those skills with others, or we can apply those skills to different domains. So I'm curious how you think then about integration, right? What's your current model around how to facilitate an effective integration period post-medicine work?
I think integration, first of all, I think it's important to say that, we're working with macro dosing experiences, right?
Right.
So I believe integration begins in preparation. It begins in when we have people prepare, they are reading at least one of two books. Letting Go by David Hawkins. He wrote Power versus Force, which was translated into 35 plus languages, and elucidates a process that's shared with Gestalt, with internal family systems, et cetera, of just being with the inner sensation of your experience while letting go of the labels, the stories, the beliefs that might cause you to fight, flight, or freeze, right? Somatic experiencing shares this too. And number two, No Bad Parts, which is Dr. Richard Short's book on internal family systems, the most paired psychotherapeutic framework with psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, right? And so people are coming in with tools already. They're like, eye-opening. These books already are life-changing with proper intentionality. Then in the container itself, we spend 8 a.m. to 3, 4 p.m. every day in workshops where we're learning and practicing tools on each other. So people are facilitating each other and facilitating themselves. So it's not this, unilateral, like I am at the pulpit speaking to the group. We are sitting in a circle. We're turning to each other and working dyads, and we're facilitating each other in these tools that we learn to be with our own experience, reveal our experience, and be with each other in supportive experience in greater authenticity, vulnerability, and access, right? In our container, we have 3 ceremonies. And so over the course of those ceremonies, the experience builds. And typically our 3rd ceremony enters into very deep spiritual domains. Our belief as an organization, as a church, is that once we let go of our protective parts, spirituality naturally bubbles up and arises, right? And so when people go home for integration, they are already armed with this bat belt of authentic relating tools, of internal family systems, relating to parts work, of community, so on and so forth. And so our integration process, I think, is quite unique. We meet every Sunday here, in person and online, and then we practice our tools every week, right? And there are WhatsApp groups for each journey, and a full alumni group with our hundreds of alumni that are holding each other in both the challenges and celebrations, right? And so there's this revealing process, and then there's this process of circling and authentically relating with each other, practicing these tools. And then our alumni also have the opportunity, many of our alumni, coaches, top performing CEOs, teachers, doctors, et cetera, our alumni have the ability to offer to the community something that they are great at, right? Like we have a guy who's a business coach, and he's just offering free advice to executives. And we have our medical director, who is one of the top doctors in the Denver metropolitan area, offering free medical advice to all of our alumni, which is this great perk, So the integration for us is happening in community live, practicing what we've already learned, right?
It's beautiful. So I want to get into what differentiates you from, or a key aspect of what differentiates you from every other retreat center out there, which is that you're doing this work outside Denver. Colorado has recently legalized personal possession of psychedelics. They're putting in sort of, regulations to approve the therapeutic use of it at licensed centers. And we have this developing church model where, there are hundreds at this point in time of churches that are working with psychedelics and plant medicine. Some have a physical location like you, others do not. So, I'm first curious, what is the organization of ceremony? Like, how is that structured, so to say? Legally, what are you allowed to do versus what isn't basically capable under law? And then, what impact is it having, do you think, on just the community, people in Denver, people in the more specific area that you're in here? How are you seeing the sort of ripples effects of some of the legal access to psychedelics here in Denver and Colorado?
Yeah, great. Well, first, your first question, Ceremonia is a nonprofit church. We formed 2 years ago when the Natural Medicine Health Act in Colorado was still something being drafted, right? And the idea all along, in fact, the reason why we moved to Colorado was because it's at the forefront of the psychedelic movement. Oregon was the first state to legalize, but suffice you to say, it's having a lot of trouble, right? And I got into the psychedelic space first as an executive. I was added to a board of advisors for a company in the psychedelic space and started investing in psychedelic companies, so on and so forth. And so in founding Ceremonia here, the idea was to be at the tip of the spear of this blue ocean model. First, federally legal under the Religious Rights and Freedom Act, right? We serve the medicine as sacrament. And we are a church. I mean, we meet every Sunday, we gather, and we pray, and we invite all faiths into this experience. Because fundamentally what we are doing here is orienting us towards having a spiritual experience, your personal spiritual experience, not something that somebody tells you should be a spiritual experience, right? And then now, as Colorado first decriminalized a few months ago, and now legalizing both therapeutically and creating spiritual centers, we are once again at the tip of the sphere of this being state level legal. So at the state level, we are also operating legally because as a nonprofit, the sacrament itself is not something that you're paying for. What you're paying for here to our nonprofit organization is the facilitation, right? Is the support that we provide in all the workshops, in the preparation, in the integration, and in the community that you get to be a part of, right? And so we have both a state and federal level legality as Ceremonia, which is really, I think, the very first foundation of safety for people entering a psychedelic experience. I think that's so important that people aren't afraid that they're going to get raided during this psychedelic experience, or years later they're put on some list because they did it at some point. So I think that's really important. What were your other questions?
The other question was, what impact are you seeing locally, like in the community and in terms of the rippling out effect of Ceremonia, yes, but maybe just broadly about psychedelics here in Colorado? What are you noticing and observing?
Yeah, we have the good fortune not only to be legal, but to also be quite public about it. And I think we might be one of a few, or maybe the only organization in Colorado that's really doing that at large. So, as an effect, we've had the good grace of having a lot of support, particularly both at the spiritual model and the therapeutic model of many leaders, like the Greys, visionary artists, or like people in the field. I don't need to name them. So what's happening, and it's part of our mission, is to share with the psychedelic world at large this protocol of preparing people for a psychedelic experience and then supporting them in integrating with tools and enhancing tools and capacity, right? Using the tools that we have. So what we're seeing in the community, we're halfway between Denver and Boulder. Boulder tends to be more spiritual and woo-woo. Denver tends to be more business and grounded. The ripple effect that we're seeing is that number one, we're just building a lot more community in Colorado, right? We have about 70 alumni so far in the last 2 years, just from Colorado alone. I mean, that's already very special. But we're penetrating into a very diverse strata of communities. We've worked with top public speakers in the world, and we've worked with artists and teachers. We've worked with combat veterans and first responders, and we've worked with top doctors and CEOs. So in this local community, it's what's happened is ceremonies kind of become known as like a go-to place of this integrated model of how to approach this work. That's not to say that we're not also divisive, right? Some people believe that in the way that you're supposed to work with plant medicine, it's supposed to be purely shamanistic. Some people believe the way you're supposed to work with is purely therapeutic, and we're standing somewhere in between those two models for a good reason.
Right. It's the syncretic approach, and mushrooms make this feasible, I think, more than any other medicine. Ketamine does as well. MDMA could. I mean, the combination of mushrooms and MDMA is something that's very special. Ayahuasca definitely more shamanic, bringing in that lineage is important. But mushrooms are they're like the medicine of the people. I mean, this is when we were studying synthesis, same thing. We were looking at, okay, let's take best practices. Let's make sure we're legal and above ground, but also let's bring in age-old ritual to ensure that the experience feels authentic and grounded and connected and all these sorts of things. And it's been interesting to see in the last 6-7 years how many centers have opened. I mean, Synthesis went bankrupt as a retreat because of COVID, largely. And what I've noticed as of late is that there's so many centers now, or so many people hosting retreats, or so many churches, that we're at a surplus, that the market, if you will, has been flooded. And we're at that point culturally where a lot of the pioneers and first movers have jumped on board, but we haven't yet stretched where it's like super mainstream. And I think that's the next big gap to close, if you will, is how do we get more and more people, average everyday people, interested and involved with this, which is, of course, why I love microdosing and at-home use and all these sorts of things. So the point of this is I'm curious, for Ceremonia, for the work that you're doing, for the impact that you want to have on the world, who is this for, really? Like, who would be ideal to come and join for a group experience at Ceremonia, and who might this not necessarily be for?
The way that I think about this work is what would you do if you were going into a life-changing surgery, right? It's the way that I think about the difference between a trip and a transformation. If you're going into life-changing surgery, you're not going to go do it on yourself, watch a YouTube video and start, playing with your own body. You're probably not going to go to your neighborhood surgeon. You're probably going to do a lot of research, right? And apply a sense of rigor to your decision-making process. Look at reviews, look at process, look at pedigrees, so on and so forth, right? This is the way that I look at how to choose an experience that you're going to have that is aimed at life-changing transformation at a mental, spiritual, and also physical level when we work with macrodosing psilocybin or ayahuasca. And so who this is for is someone that really is looking for deep and durable transformation, safe and lasting transformation, right? Where you're not just here for a trip, you are here to learn the tools and build your capacity so that when you go home, the transformation that you've experienced, the profound experience that you've had, doesn't just get wasted. You are making meaningful change in your life, in your relationships, in your business, in your purpose, the impact you bring to others. Yeah. And that happens through this integration of not only your awareness and your compassion, but also the skills necessary to navigate life's challenges. Because here's what happens with awareness. We've changed, but the world hasn't. And so in order to meet ourselves with greater authenticity and bring that with courage and fearlessness out into the world, we need help with that. And that the best form of help is self-empowerment through skills, right? And who this is not for, it's interesting because we've taken a lot of different individuals and cases. We've had some of the top CEOs in the world, and we've also had combat veterans that had complex PTSD. We've had people with bipolar type 2, people that would normally get rejected by the psychedelic community at large because they just weren't appropriate, let's say, or there was some, history. But so who this is not for, I actually struggle to answer this question because what we've experienced is that when we mix a billionaire with a starving artist, but in this container, we're just human. And I think most people would be surprised to see just how challenging life could be for somebody who has an inordinate amount of money, right? And it's because fundamentally, it's not how much pain that you're going through that matters. It's your relationship to the pain, right? It's how much you're suffering. When Ram Dass, a spiritual leader, had a stroke and then he was only able to speak like one word per minute, when he strung together the words, he was able to express his gratitude for that experience because he was like, oh, now I get to be even more in my mind, even more in myself, treating it like a meditation. That's to most people, I think that would be, that would induce a great amount of suffering. Oh my God, I want to end my life because I can barely interact with the world. But in his case, he was like, I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for the life that is about to end, you know? And so who this is for, who this is not for, I think this is for people who are really discerning about their own transformation. They're looking for great safety. Looking for great facilitators. They're looking for access, in a legal setting here that is in the middle of the United States. They're looking for people that, a container that has held hundreds of people with 100% five-star reviews and 96% saying it's the most transformative experience of their lives. Like they're looking for that. And who it's not for, I think is maybe for everybody else who's looking for something more casual and yeah.
So what's then the vision for Ceremonia? Because as I've been here, even in just I've been here less than a day, we've pinged a number of really fun ideas off of each other. You've shared some of those with me. It's involved land and potentially real estate and centers and courses. And, there's, I think, a lot that both you and Choo Choo want to bring out into the world through Ceremonia. So I'd be curious for you to spend a little bit of time with your involvement in the psychedelic ecosystem, specifically with your involvement in Denver or the general Denver area, Denver, Boulder, Colorado. How is it that you want Ceremony to continue to grow? What would be your vision maybe 3, 5, 10 years from now? How do you see this playing out? Let's start there, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on the broader ecosystem at large as well. We'll start there specific to Ceremonia.
Cool. I think to answer this, I want to take a top-down approach, right? In our integration program, we have people clarify their values. Values are something that are really enduring. After Steve Jobs passed, the values that he imbued into Apple continue on. And so his legacy is able to continue on, right? And so the vision that my wife and I have for Ceremonia is really baked into the values that we have. And our mission statement is to catalyze spiritual connection in community for the psychedelically curious. So one thing that separates us as it pertains to values and vision is that the psychedelic community tends to be very polarized between medical and shamanistic, right? It's like medical, you're going to go into a doctor's office and get a ketamine injection and you're going to have an experience. And then you're going to go home and wonder what the heck you're going to do with that experience. It's a lot of ketamine clinics. Shamanistic, we're going to go to the jungles of the Amazon and people are going to blow smoke and wave feathers in my face, speak in a foreign language, and I'm going to have a big experience. And then I'm going to come back to a city and be like, oh my God, how do I integrate this, right? And that also tends to carry a lot of dogma with it. So it's very spiritually oriented, but it's like, this is what we believe and this is what you're going to see and this is what's going to happen to you.
Right.
So our core value is to, it's encoded into the beliefs of our sanctuary. It's that truth is subjective, that when we unburden our protective layers, we experience that as love and peace and gratitude and harmony. And truth is also objective in that regard. And when we unburden ourselves, our subjective experience of truth, which can be experienced as God or self or divinity or Jesus, Christ consciousness or Buddha nature or whatever word you want to give it, spirituality for us is so much deeper than the word or the idea. It is the feeling. And that feeling is so deeply personal. Only you can feel it, right? And yet somehow, some way, when we are feeling it together, and when we, or if even if we're feeling it apart, we can still connect with it because that feeling goes far beyond us. And whatever label or image or vision you give it, it's really the essence of that feeling that matters. And so our core value is to support people in the psycho-spiritual path to discover that feeling of spirituality inside of themselves, right? Something that's so intimate that cannot be conveyed in a word or in a book. It must be discovered and felt internally, right? To that end, we believe the end point of psychology is the beginning point of spirituality. And so we use the most cutting edge techniques from neuroscience, from psychotherapy. We include biohacking in our program. Like, we include a lot of science and research-backed evidence. And then what we believe is what is truly deeply healing is spirituality, right? Because spirituality, psychotherapy says you have something wrong and this is how to fix it. Spirituality says there is nothing wrong with you and all you got to do is just realize that, right? So the vision for us is to spread the model that we are facilitating so that people can have an integrated spiritual experience. Your company is called Third Wave, I believe because of the third wave of psychology. I don't know what wave we are in spirituality, but I think we're in a very new paradigm, right? And this new paradigm is a model that doesn't push away the ancient learnings from Judeo-Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism, et cetera, or Taoism. It doesn't push away the avant-garde techniques from psychotherapy or psychospirituality. It integrates and collects them. And it says, choose your own adventure. And here's the path that we think works the best. Right?
This is third wave psychology.
Well, this is what I would call the new wave of spirituality.
New wave of spirituality.
That we're here to, as a value system in us, that we are wanting to spread. And the mechanism by which we wish to spread that is first through embodiment, right? Us as co-founders, the facilitation team that we work with, it's like, how do we practice what we preach, and how do we be with you in your experience vulnerably, authentically, human and messy, not claiming that I've figured it all out, but like I'm on my path too. And here are the things that I'm fucking up in my life, and here's the way that I'm approaching it, like really living what we share, right? So that's number one. And then number two, like sharing the skillfulness via education, via practicing it in container, via facilitating other people and supporting people and really feeling what it means to surrender and let go and transition from a state of depression and apathy and fear to a state of acceptance, breathing in and appreciating what life really is. That vision, I think, is a really big vision because, as I shared, there are these like two models out there. But to facilitate the model that we are in integrity, I think requires a lot. Like, again, we're about to run our 26th retreat. And I would say that we didn't even begin to really figure it out until maybe our 12th retreat. Yeah, we still had great impact. But the psychedelic experience, I believe, is fundamentally self-fulfilling. If you go in there thinking you're going to see Jesus Christ, well, you're going to see Jesus Christ. If you go in there thinking you're going to see plant spirits, you're going to see plant spirits, right? If you go in there thinking I have all these things wrong with me, you might experience that, right? And so the trap that I think a lot of facilitators run into is they're like, I have this way of thinking and this protocol. I'm going to facilitate it. People have a vast majority of people have somewhat of a positive experience, right? Or at least an eye-opening experience. And then their facilitators like, what I did must be right? And I think that's a really dangerous trap to fall into because then you don't grow, right? You're not really interrogating underneath, like, why am I a facilitator? What am I doing? And so, as it pertains to vision, what we are constantly iterating towards is a process that is about emergence. It's about meeting whatever is here. The Hakomi method kind of elucidates this. It's the first step of the Hakomi method is like, let's just be with what is, right? If I'm feeling fear right now, I'm going to be with my fear. If I'm feeling anger right now, I'm going to be with my anger. If I feel shame right now, I'm going to be with my shame, right? Then the second step is let's give you tools to be even deeper in what is. Because the more that we can create space for our own feelings, not only are we producing the content of like, I'm able to like let this go more and surrender into it more, embrace it more rather than reject it, which creates suffering. But I'm grounding into myself the process of being with my feelings more and more back in the real world versus what we've learned.
Developing the capacity to be with your feelings, right? The nervous system resilience, back to that. It's a muscle.
Right. And the third step is then we can move the experience. But what so much of is facilitated out there right now is, hey, you're feeling anger? No, you shouldn't feel that way. You should feel happy. You should feel grateful for your anger. Let's celebrate your anger. Let's be in joy, you know? And something as simple as music can infer that. In a ceremony space, and especially in a collective space, let's say the room is filled with some heavy energy. If as a ceremonialist, I started just playing celebratory, vibrant music, what could happen in someone's system is internally, subconsciously, they might think, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this pain right now. I should be feeling joy. And so then they're going to put a smile on their face and fake it, right? When we go home and ground that process, instead of grounding the process of authenticity, we ground the process of rejecting our feelings, rejecting who we truly are underneath. And that builds more protective layers, which inhibits us from really being with ourselves more. And then that inhibits us from being connected with other people. And so the ultimate vision is to spread this concept of spirituality, that you are a perfect being and you are here to experience your perfect imperfection. Yeah.
Let's talk about circling.
Yeah.
What is circling, and what role does that play with your retreats, and what impact does it have with the clients that you work with?
I love circling. So circling is it came out of Gestalt therapy, which came out of Esalen Institute. And it is often related to a group meditation on the present moment, right? It's all about being with our current experience in presence and unfolding that experience deeper and deeper with great curiosity and great compassion. And so circling might begin with this question of, what's it like to be you right now? So Paul, what's it like to be you right now?
A little tired and scratchy. My throat's a little scratchy. I'm a little stoned. I'm hungry. But overall, my mood and spirits are high, and it feels really good to be me right now.
What's it like to hold the high spirits with the tiredness at the same time? It almost feels like a polarity.
Yeah, there's a sense of wanting to rest and sleep and relax and sit by the fire, but that the context that I'm in isn't facilitating that because I'm on the road, I'm traveling, I'm nomadic. So the tiredness is present, but not overwhelming and somewhat contextual in that we've been recording podcasts now for 3 hours and it's 6 p.m. here. So I think it's also probably just like, oh, the day is close to being done, you know?
Yeah.
It was a good day.
Yeah. I imagine earlier you shared that like it still feels good. And I imagine it's like holding both this feeling in your body of like, oh, it's the end of the day. I just want to rest. But also seems like a tint of celebration too. Like, oh, it's been good. We've done some good work here.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And what's it like to recognize that?
Well, it's a good moment of gratitude and reflection that I often don't spend time at the end of my days just reflecting on how good of a day it was, checking in with myself about where I'm at. So it's a nice cherry on top that I don't normally get to eat.
Yeah, and hearing this gratitude and seeing the smile on your face. And I feel that in me too right now. Like, I'm like, yeah, oh, it's beautiful. We've been doing podcasts all day and now I feel connected with you in this present moment, in this gratitude.
And so this is circling.
And so this is circling.
I love it.
You know, but
it happens in a group dynamic. There's 5, 10, and is it dyads are breaking off and just one-on-ones, or is it one person who's on the stand and everyone else is watching? Like, how does that process work in a bigger group?
There are different forms of circling, and it's something that we do every Sunday here, right? And earlier I shared what I view the psychedelic experience as a focused microcosm of all of life. And so if you think about all of life, we are constantly impacting each other, right? Body language is something like 70% of communication. And if I am holding my phone in my hand while I'm communicating with you, there's some impact there that may go unacknowledged. It's unconscious. So as a group container, we are exploring this constant impact that we're all having on each other. So imagine 2 to 10 people sitting in a circle, and I just did what I did with you, and then someone might chime in, be like, hey, I'm really curious about this experience of tiredness and also like gratitude, holding it at the same time, because in this moment, I just feel tired, and then that might impact somebody else. And what's so interesting about circling is as we make the unconscious conscious, as we voice in authenticity and deepen together in presence, it feels like we're getting high. It feels like, that's why it's often related to group meditation, right? Because when you sit by yourself alone and you take breaths and you pay attention to your breath, you're able to get, like Ramdas says, get more high than he did on 10 tabs of acid. And the same thing happens, but in connection. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, to me, it reflects the real world. Because in the real world, yes, you have your own internal experience, right? Like meditation, but you are not alone in the real world. You're constantly being impacted by others. You're constantly impacting others. And so as we start to learn this skill and adopt the language even of that, of like, oh, what's that like? What we can do in the psychedelic experience is when mushrooms or ayahuasca brings up something that at that moment feels hard, right? Brings up a trauma, let's say. And like, oh, what's the best thing you can do in that moment? The best thing you can do in that moment is like, oh, what's that like for me? What's here for me? And then pour compassion into it. Explore that sensation in your body, feel the impact of it. You hear someone's water bottle drop. I remember in One Heart, they're like, everybody put your water bottles on your side because it doesn't clink on the ground. You hear that. And in that moment, you're on the precipice of revelation. You're about to figure out the keys to the cosmos. And you hear the water bottle drop and you're like, fuck,
I lost it.
I lost it. What do you do in that moment? Do you start making a list of all the vengeance you're going to have on the person that dropped the water bottle?
Potentially. I would.
You've definitely done that. Or do you ask yourself, why is this happening for me? What's this doing inside of me? Where was my attachment to, where was my even egoic belief of having the keys to the universe, et cetera? You know what I mean? And so that practice of circling enhances the way that we can relate to each other in presence, in curiosity, in vulnerability and authenticity.
And it comes from authentic relating. Authentic relating, I've done a little bit of it. Sometimes in medicine space. I've done quite a bit of eye gazing. Circling sounds unique. So I'm grateful that you've brought it up. It'll be a fun modality to explore when I do make it to Ceremonia, to be able to go through this experience with you. It's been fun to record almost 2 hours of podcasts today as well. And so just as we wrap up, I'd love to, folks are listening to this if they want to learn more. And I think, again, the big thing that I'll emphasize is this is legal. This is in Colorado. It's in the States. You're like 30 minutes from the airport.
Psilocybin and ayahuasca.
Exactly.
Not at the same time.
But a lot of folks who are listening to this, great options are hard to come by. So if folks want to check out more about Ceremonia and your work, potentially look at attending a retreat, what direction would you point them in?
Well, we're in the Third Wave directory, of course. At ceremoniacircle.org is our website. We host a weekly welcome on Sundays where you can come and you listen to facilitators, share, and then you can actually interact with our alumni community who are coming every Sunday to first share their experience with a group of people that are interested, and then doing our process together in, sharing a potluck and then doing our circling as part of it. We're on Instagram at Ceremonia Circle, and we've got plenty of content. We have a Foundations of Psychedelic Healing course, which is a free online course that you can access at a click of a button and just learn about not only our process, but how the history of psychedelics and the different modalities and how mindfulness applies and so on and so forth. And so lots of resources on our website and on IG.
Great. So ceremoniacircle.org. Foundations of Psychedelics is a free online course. Austin, thank you for opening your beautiful home, your beautiful retreat center, for the podcast that we did earlier today, and for your time and energy and jumping on the show. And I had a lot of fun unpacking things, and we haven't had this level of depth and detail in a conversation before, so it was fun to explore some new areas.
Awesome. You ready for the steam room?
I'm ready for the steam room. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks so much for watching. If you want to grow your own medicine for microdosing or high dose experiences, check out our Mushroom Grow Kit. It's the simplest way to get a reliable source of high quality mushrooms, and it includes detailed videos walking you through the entire process. No guessing, just clear instructions for best results. Check out the link in the description below.